Hello and welcome to this new lesson, which is intended for students of grade 12. In this lesson, we're going to revise grammar and set book questions from Module 4, Unit 10. But first, we'll take a short break, then we'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back, dear students. As I said earlier, today we're going to revise grammar and set book questions from Module 4, Unit 10. So let's get started. Yesterday morning, I got up and looked out of the window. The sun was shining, but the ground was very wet. It had been raining. Now, had been raining is a verb in the past perfect continuous tense. And this is what we're going to study today. Now, here is an excerpt from your student book, page 79. Now, notice that we have two verbs in the past perfect continuous tense. The first one is had been preparing, and the second one is had been fighting. Now, how do we form the past perfect continuous tense? Well, have a look at the following verbs: had been playing, had been swimming, had been shopping, and had been watching. Have you, or can you spot any similarities between these, between the way these verbs are formed? Now notice that all these verbs start with the auxiliary verb had been, plus we have the present participle of the main verb. So to form the past perfect continuous, we use had been plus the present participle. And the present participle, by definition, means the base form of the verb followed by ing. Let's practice using the present participle. So, for the verb think, the present participle is thinking. Remember, we use the base form of the verb, which is think, and we add ing. Now it's your turn. Practice with the verb buy. The present participle is buying. Sleep becomes sleeping. Dream, dreaming. Throw, throwing. Wear, wearing. And the last verb, swim, in the present participle, swimming. Now, let's conjugate these verbs in the past perfect continuous tense. Remember, we use had been followed by the present participle. So for the verb think, the past perfect continuous is had been thinking. Buy, in the past perfect continuous, becomes had been buying. Sleep, had been sleeping. Dream, had been dreaming. Throw, had been throwing. And this is true for all the pronouns. Okay, so wear, had been wearing. And swim, had been swimming. Okay, now let's talk about the past perfect continuous tense in the negative form. So we use had plus not plus been plus the present participle. And in the contracted form, or in the short form, we use hadn't plus been plus present participle. So let's practice. Here is a sentence. He had not been doing well. Okay, so had not been doing well. In the contracted form, or in the short form, we say hadn't been doing. Hadn't been training becomes hadn't been training. And had not been shopping becomes hadn't been shopping. Now let's talk about the past perfect continuous tense in the interrogative form. So notice that the sentence word order starts with a subject plus had been plus the present participle. But in a question, we need to switch the helping verb and the subject. So we start with had, and then the subject, and then been, followed by the present participle. So Hamad had been preparing. If I want to ask a question, then I switch the word order of the subject and the helping verb had. And the question becomes, had Hamad been preparing well for the tournament, for example? Don't forget to end up your interrogative sentence with question mark. Okay, here is another example. In this one, you have a personal pronoun instead of a name or a pronoun for a name of a person. So they had been studying becomes had they been studying. Now, we use the past perfect continuous tense to talk about the duration of an activity that continued up to a specific point in time. Remember when we talked about the past perfect simple, we said it is used to talk about two actions that occurred or that happened in the past, and one came before the other. The first action is in the past perfect. In the past perfect continuous tense, we are talking about two actions, two events that occurred in the past, and one is before the other, but the stress, the focus is on the duration. It is an ongoing event. Okay? You understand it better with the following example. They had been talking for over an hour before she arrived. Let's use a timeline here, and remember the timeline, we start with the present. Now, the past perfect continuous tense doesn't have any relation to the present. We're not talking about the present at all. These two actions are in the past. So the first action we have, she arrived. Okay? So she arrived in the past. Before she arrived, these two people had been talking. Okay? So they kept talking for over an hour. It is an ongoing event. Okay? So they had been talking for over an hour. Now notice that when we use the past perfect continuous, most of the time we use keywords such as for and since. But again, we are talking about two actions in the past. Right? Here is another example. The girl had been having sleepless nights and feeling very nervous before she was treated. In this example, we use the past perfect continuous tense to talk about an action which was repeated many times in the past. So the timeline again, this is the present, and the girl is fine, is having a restful night. However, last Friday, she had sleepless night. On Saturday, the same thing happened. The same thing was repeated on Sunday and on Monday. Then her mother took her to the doctor and she was treated. So notice that she had been having sleepless nights. This happened to her many times in the past before she was treated. Now, dear students, we are going to move to practice. And in this exercise, what we want you to do is to correct the underlined mistakes. In each sentence, you will find one or two mistakes. And what I want you to do is to try to find the correct tense. Okay? So here is the question. Correct the underlined mistakes. And here is the first sentence. The sentence reads, "We had been playing tennis for only a few minutes when it had started raining heavily." We have two actions, and both happened in the past, but one came before the other, and for the first one, the stress is on the duration. Okay? Notice we use for only a few minutes. So we should use the past perfect continuous tense, and by definition, we use had been followed by the present participle, and to form the present participle, we use the base form of the verb followed by an ing. So the correct answer is, we had been playing tennis for only a few minutes when it. The second action, the second event, should be in the simple past. And the simple past of the verb start is started. Okay, next sentence. They said that, notice that this is a reported speech. We are reporting a sentence. They said that they have been shopping. Now, when we report a sentence, we shift back in time. So the present perfect continuous becomes past perfect continuous. So here we should use had instead of have. And the complete sentence reads, they said that they had been shopping. Another sentence, we had been thinking about buying a new house, but then we decided to stay here. Now, what is the helping verb or the auxiliary verb we agreed to use in the past perfect continuous tense? It's not being, it's been instead. Had been thinking is the correct answer in this sentence. Okay, here is another example. They had been swimming in the water since 2 hours when they were saved. Now here the word since is used incorrectly. Now to correct it, we use the word for, because here we're talking about a duration, okay, 2 hours. Next sentence, the ground was wet, it had raining. Now, to correct this sentence, we should say the ground was wet, it had been raining. Again, here is another sentence. Omar passed all his exams. He has been revising for a month. Okay? So has been revising is a present perfect tense, which means that an action which occurred in the past and continued up to the moment of speaking. But here, the action didn't continue up to the moment of speaking because Omar passed all his exams. So he's not revising anymore. So the answer here is he had been revising for a month. I went to the hospital to see my friend. He had been breaking his leg during a football match. Now, when we use the past perfect continuous here, we have the intention, or we could mean that this happened to him many times. It is a repeated action, okay? But we know that it didn't happen repeatedly, it happened just once. Therefore, we should not use the past perfect continuous tense. On the other hand, we should use the past perfect simple. So the correct answer here is he had broken his leg during a football match. I received a letter from my friend yesterday. He promising to write since last year. So since last year, he had been promising. This is a repeated action. He promised so many times, okay? And therefore, to express this repetition of an event in the past, we use the past perfect continuous. Okay, now let's move to the second part of this episode, which is about set book questions from Module 4, Unit 10. Okay, now first of all, I would like you to look at the pictures and try to guess the purpose of what these people are doing. Okay, I'll give you a few seconds to have a look at all of them. Right? So you might have come to the conclusion that these people are trying to push the limits. They are trying to live on edge, and they are trying to set new world records. Right? So here is the first question. Why do people choose to push themselves to extreme limits and do something physically and mentally demanding? Put it simply, why do people enjoy engaging in extreme sports and extreme activities? Right. Probably because they seek adventure, or they look for excitement, or they want to be famous and popular. Probably because they try to inspire the youth, okay? Or they aim to set new world records, or they want to prove themselves and their skills and what they're capable of, or they fight for a cause. So any of these answers could be accepted as correct and full answer for that set book question. Second question, what qualities would a person need to survive in extreme conditions? When we talk about extreme conditions, we're talking about extreme heat or extreme cold, dizzying heights, okay? So for that, the adventurer needs motivation, courage, determination, endurance, strong will, and self-confidence. Okay? Here is a complete answer. To survive in extreme conditions, the adventurer needs to have a lot of motivation and courage. In addition to that, he must be self-confident, determined, and strong-willed to endure these tough conditions. Right, here is another question. What kind of preparations do people have to make before they go on expeditions? So, first, they should get safety equipment. Okay, so always when you go on an expedition, you should hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. So safety equipment is so necessary. It is not only necessary that you get safety equipment, it is also important to check that these safety equipment is working properly. Okay? So it is also recommended to tell people about their intention, about your whereabouts. Okay? They should always get a plan B in case something goes wrong. So here is an example of a plan B, for example, for a mountaineer who is trying to ascend such a mountain. So he should set steps and then he has a plan B. In case there is an avalanche or there is something wrong and cannot ascend the first route, he can take the second one. Now, it is imperative to carry a mobile phone, a compass, or any sort of a GPS system. It is also necessary to tell people how to act in case of an emergency. So in case something goes wrong, then you have to call someone, and don't expect that people will know what to do. So tell them exactly who to contact, who to talk to in case something goes wrong and you get injured. Next question reads, how do word breakers feel after a successful attempt? So it's easy to answer such question. When someone sets a new world record or manages a difficult attempt, he feels exhilarated, extremely happy, overjoyed, and triumphant, victorious. What are the difficulties and problems mountaineers might encounter? Well, mountaineers might encounter perilous conditions. Perilous here means hazardous, very dangerous. They would fight extreme cold and strong winds. Also, enduring dizzying heights, dangerously low level of oxygen, and low pressure are some other examples of difficulties. In addition to that, they might be very exhausted, very tired, and frostbitten. What are the risks a mountaineer could run into in case of a mishap? In case of an accident, what could happen to a mountaineer? Well, first of all, there's always the risk of a fatal accident. Okay? So many mountaineers lost their lives while striving to fulfill their dreams. Disability is another serious risk. Head and neck fracture is not an uncommon injury. Adding to that, the risk of being lost in an avalanche or a blizzard. Which world record has impressed you the most? Well, there are so many world records that you can mention here, but I have two in mind. The first person to travel solo around the world in a hot air balloon, and the second one is the first person to pilot a glider. You have a picture of a glider there, into the stratosphere. Okay, dear students, now we're going to move to literature time, and the novel that we're going to deal with is Great Expectations. And today we're going to focus only on episode 4. So here is the first question. And remember that these questions are of general nature. So I'm not going to refer to any details related to the characters or the setting or any major events of the story. I'm going just to tackle major questions, okay? Questions of general nature. So you can feel free to answer them in any way you'd like. So for example, here is the first question. How do people feel when they hurt a close friend? Okay? So hurting a friend unintentionally makes people feel guilty and remorseful. This could lead to continual anxiety, deep sorrow, and bitter sadness. So people who intentionally or unintentionally distance themselves from old friends, like what happened to Pip and Joe, then they would feel guilty, they would feel remorseful, reproachful, and also they would feel anxious, and also they feel sorry and very unhappy in their lives. Next slide. And the question reads, what is the consequence of an extravagant lifestyle? An extravagant lifestyle is a lifestyle in which the person spends wastefully. He wastes his money. Now, spending extravagantly will ultimately lead to financial difficulties, such as debt or expenses you couldn't afford, and bankruptcy. Okay, dear students, let's move to another question, which reads, what is the key to business success? So what are the factors that contribute to the success of a certain person in general and specifically to a businessman? And here we're talking about the relationship between Pip and also his roommate and his friend, Mr. Pocket. Okay, so during their business, they didn't manage their time very well, and they wasted their money, and also they didn't have a clear plan, and they work without any aim and without any goals. So here, a successful businessman should manage his time well. It is a prerequisite for any successful person to manage his time and to organize himself, and also to know what to do in which time frame or in which time span. Also, it's very important to organize your work. So working methodically or working according to a certain plan is very necessary. Plan everything ahead. Okay, so this will eliminate sudden failures. So if you plan things and you have an extra plan or a plan B, then you can be successful in your life and also in business. It is very important that you set achievable targets. Your objectives and aims should be very achievable. They should be realistic. They shouldn't be imaginary or far-fetched. Okay? And also, you should learn from previous failures. So many people fail and make mistakes. You should not give up. You should try and try again and learn from those mistakes and try to do better each time. So we know about lots of self-made men who made it simply because they were very determined, they didn't give up, and they continued working on themselves, and they tried to improve themselves till they succeeded at the end. So remember again that these questions are of general nature, and that when you answer them, you can resort to your free readings or to your experience in life to come up with ideas. Well, dear students, this lesson has come to an end. I hope it was beneficial to you. In today's episode, we have revised how to form and how to use the past perfect continuous tense. Remember that it is used by following such a rule. We use the had been plus the present participle, had been plus the verb plus ing. And then on the second part of this episode, we talked about questions related to Module 4, Unit 10, which is entitled Achievements. And we have answered a few questions. I remind you again that these questions could be questions for composition. So don't limit yourself to just one answer or two. Try to have more than one answer. Try to have a variety of ideas. So the day of an exam, of a writing assignment, you could have or you could generate lots of ideas, and you can write so many sentences. Okay? So thank you very much for your time and attention, and I wish you the best of luck. Till we meet again, goodbye.